should not believe that. Hello, this is Melissa Libby, and welcome to Mom Treading Water. Please note that the following episode does contain explicit language and adult subject matter that may not be appropriate for younger listeners. Today, I was honored to speak with Dr. Fanike Young. Our interview is going to be one of two parts. So this is the first part. Next week, we will drop the second part. She is the author of What the F is Your Problem? Becoming an Active Worker in Healing Your Trauma. Before we do get into the interview, if this is your first time joining Mom Treading Water, welcome and thank you for being here. If you are returning, thank you for returning and sharing your time with me. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share Mom Treading Water. Each time you do that, it does improve the analytics as well as the growth of Mom Treading Water. You can also follow us on Facebook under the name of Mom Treading Water, Instagram at Imperfect Mom Treading Water, on TikTok, YouTube, and on Pinterest. Please be sure to check out our website at momtreadingwater.com, and you can also join our weekly newsletter. All of those links will be in the show notes. Also, with the upcoming episode, I will include all of Dr. Fanike's information. Here is part one of my interview with Dr. Fanike Young. Hello, this is Melissa Libby, and welcome to Mom Treading Water. I am unbelievably honored today to have Dr. Fanike Young. She's great. When you see her profile picture, I was just saying this to her, that it gives me the feelies because there's so much, obviously it's physically gorgeous, but her love and her joy. And I just said to her, I'm like, be my friend, because I just, that beautiful feeling of it. So we need way more of that in the world today. But we're going to welcome Dr. Fanike Young. She is the author of What the F is Your Problem? Becoming an Active Worker in Healing Your Trauma. And today she's going to talk to us about trauma and her experiences. Dr. Fanike, welcome. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you so much, Melissa. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be here. I'm excited.
I'm very excited too. So before we start, can you please share who you met recently this past week? I'm so excited for you.
So this past weekend, I went to an event, the Atlanta Women's Expo here, and it was filled with stars, filled with celebrities and some just great people that weren't stars. But I had the opportunity to give my book to singer Monica and also Fantasia, actress Kim Fields, who also now has a business of her own, and she was actually there with the booth. Yeah,
nice.
Singer Tamika Scott from Escape, who also has a business now, and Molly Hopkins from I think she was on 90 Day Fiance, who also has a business. So it was also great to, of course, interact with them, and they were all just really receptive and lovely and hugging, and it was great. But it was also great to see them have their own businesses and their own setup at the event as well. So that was kind of cool. Because at the end of the day, they're regular people also, so.
That's great. I love that. I would be like, please sing from The Color Purple and now. I'm sure she probably gets that all the time. Folks who don't follow theater, Fantasia was in The Color Purple on Broadway.
Yeah. She's going to be in the movie too. There's a movie coming out. They're doing a movie and she's going to be in it as well. Yeah. She was actually there promoting her new book with her husband.
Nice. Oh, that's great. That's exciting. That's exciting you got to meet her. And I'm very excited for that movie. No one's ever read the book. It's by Alice Walker. It's an amazing story. I think it almost borders on life-changing, to be honest. But,
definitely.
It really is.
Definitely.
So today you're going to be talking about trauma. Mm-hmm. And I guess before we start getting into your experiences, can you define actually what is trauma?
So my definition of trauma is a little different from, what someone else may see if they go in the dictionary or even if they ask someone else. So the way that I define trauma is anything that alters your perception in a negative way of yourself or someone else or an experience. And so what I mean by that is that can be something that someone says to you, that can be something that you see, that can be something that you hear, and it can be something that you experience, or go through. I think that in the past, trauma has been made to be something that has to be something big and horrific. But the reality of the situation is, I grew up in a household where there was some verbal abuse, and my mom was emotionally avoidant towards us. And so, she would say things. And my sister to this day still, can recount like all of the negative things that my mom has said to her, from, you're stupid to, you're ugly. Like, she still holds on to that stuff. And so, that's why I define it the way that I do, because I don't think it has to be something that is, truly, horrific or large, or, something so life shattering, to that point. So.
No, I think that's a really interesting perception of that, because sometimes, like, I see your point. I have something in my head that happened when, I remember always hearing, if you lost 20 pounds, you'd look really good. I still hear that. Even, like, I feel like I've gained a couple of pounds, and that is all I hear in my head, is because I'm not losing that 20 pounds. Now I don't look good. It does. That makes me feel like I'm not completely losing it. So thank you. Thank you for sharing that. So do you mind talking a little bit more about your own childhood trauma? Whatever you're comfortable disclosing.
Yeah. So I'm an open book. So I I disclose a lot about it in my book. And, the trauma that I remember, started around the age 4. I grew up in Brooklyn, New York in the 80s, crack epidemic and high violence during that time. And, it's a different Brooklyn now. But, growing up, or at least during that time, it was, we were exposed to a lot of things that most children were not exposed to. And I just remember, seeing someone get murdered in front of our building. And, the man was like outside, and someone like walked up to him and just like shot him in the head. And of course, I think now, it was probably drug related looking back. But seeing that, and then my father, when he was alive, he was very aggressive towards my mom. I remember him pulling up in his car, and he didn't live with us, but I remember him coming to see me, and I pulled away from my mom and started running towards him. Well, he was parked across the street, and it was a very busy street. And I remember him like going off on her, like she let me, go, when the reality was I saw him, got excited, pulled away, and, ran towards him. And I was a child, so I didn't think about the cars and all that. So, but that, I remember him being like physically assaulting her in front of us in the house. And I remember feeling like I wanted to help her, but also feeling powerless, in that moment, just because I was a child, not wanting him to hurt her. And I remember a time when my dad was a butcher. And back then they had the meat district in New York, and he worked there as a butcher. And I remember seeing him physically assault her, and then reaching for this knife that he had bought my mom. And it was like a really thick knife. It was one of the butcher knives. Yeah. And so, I remember grabbing it, and my sister, who's 4 years older than me, grabbing it from me, and me leaving the house because at that point it was like, well, I don't know what to do. And we had some stairs outside of our apartment. I grew up in a brownstone. It's a 2-story brownstone. So there was an apartment upstairs and an apartment downstairs, and we lived in the one downstairs. And I remember sitting on the stairs that went up to my neighbor's house, and my dad coming out the house, and him, coming over to me. He's like, I'm coming back to get you. And so I'm looking back now, assuming that that's what the fight was about. He was trying to get me, and my mom was like, no. Or he was trying to take me from her, and she was like, no. And when he left, he yelled up to her, like, I'm coming back to get my daughter, and I'm going to kill you, bitch, and that other bitch. And so the other bitch was my brother's mother. And my mom, I remember my mom and my brother's mother having built this alliance. What started off with them not necessarily, caring for each other, turned into them building this alliance. And I remember my mom calling her and telling her, like, hey, he just left here, and, he's probably on his way to your house. So the next day, I go to school, I get up, go to school, my sister goes to school. I don't remember ever talking about, that, like the abuse or anything, and go to school. And then I go to my grandmother's house. My mom is there, which she's never there because she was working, and she's there this time. And she calls me in the kitchen when I come in the door, and she tells me, your dad died. And when they found him, he had a heart attack on the stairs, leaving his apartment, and he had a gun on him. And so I'm going to assume that he was planning to, hurt her, and planning to hurt my brother's mom, and he had a heart attack. So I think I carried a lot of guilt, for one. And I also carried, I think, a lot of feelings of abandonment, like, because his last words to me were, I'm coming back to get you. And of course, then he passed away. But I think the guilt for me was, I always felt like, well, my mom would have never even been in that situation if I wasn't, born. Of course, now I realize that wasn't my fault, and it wasn't my issue. But as a child, the way that people, and especially children, the way that they process stuff, like I look at my 3-year-old now, the way that he processes stuff is, mommy's mad at me if mommy tells me I can't, do something that I want to do. And I'm like, no, I'm not mad at you. you just can't do it. I still love you, but you just can't do it. Right. But that's the way he processes stuff. So I have to have like conversations with him, and I have to say to him, it's a lot of communication in my household, even with the 3-year-old, where I'm like, okay, well, how are you feeling? He'll say to me, I'm mad at you. And I'm like, okay, well, why are you mad at mommy? Because you won't let me, get a go-go squeeze or something. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, okay, that's fine. You can be mad at mommy, but, you still have to do what mommy asks you to do, so there was never a conversation. There was never processing. There was never a, let's go to therapy. There was never, none of that occurred. And I remember going to school. I was in the 1st grade. I remember going to school, and back then we had the desk. I don't know if kids still have the desk where you could put stuff inside.
Oh yeah, the ones that flip up?
No, these didn't flip up. They were just open, and you could like stick stuff in them.
Oh, okay.
But I remember going to school, and I was wearing glasses, and I remember taking my glasses off and putting my head down and like crying in class. And I remember the kids around me, like telling the teacher, like she's crying, or, and the teacher apparently knew that my dad had passed away. And so she just kind of like kept going. And then she talked to me, later about it. Like, I remember that, but, it was like, go to school and like, just, continue the
act like nothing happened.
Continue the schedule. Right. And my mom looking back now, of course, realizing that one of her coping methods was to go to work. And I think, for a lot of us, that's what we do. It's like, if I just work, if I, make more money, if I occupy my time, I don't have to think about what's really happening in my life. I don't really have to focus on it, right? So it's a trauma response, that whole avoidance piece of having to deal with, what's really going on. And we do it in so many different ways. We do it with work, we do it with relationships, we do it with, those people that can't be single. It's a trauma response. And it's the fact that, they don't want to spend that time by themselves to really, see or get to know like what's really happening inside. So we have like all these trauma responses that we do that we don't even think about. And we're just kind of like in it, and then it becomes like a loop, because you never jump off the hamster wheel, to really dig into it and to really figure out, what's going on. And then it just becomes a part of, the day to day. And then before you even know, you've done it for 10 years, 12 years, 15 years, and you're still in the same place that you were when you started.
Did your parents, when they were growing up, did they have a history of domestic violence or verbal abuse? Do you know?
So what I do know is my father's household, from what my aunt shared with me, was that because my grandparents, they passed away when I was younger. So I never really had the chance to really, ask them. At that age, I don't think I even thought about asking them. But what my aunt shared with me was that my grandmother and my grandfather would get into it as far as like arguments. She never said that there was any physical, violence in the home. My grandmother had diabetes, and one of her feet had been amputated. I remember that. So my grandfather played a key role in getting her places and doing things for her, and, really like taking care of her. They slept in 2 different bedrooms, and but they were together. What I do know is my dad couldn't even go home. So he couldn't go visit my grandparents because the sheriff would be there to escort him out of town. I know that he played football growing up. Him and my uncle both played football. My uncle wound up going to the military and getting I think he got a football scholarship to go to school. I think my dad was a little more aggressive and because he, my brothers, they tell me stories. I'm the baby, so my brothers have told me stories about, how he was and, things that he did. And there's a story that their mother said that she didn't want to be with him anymore, and he had purchased some furniture for her, and he told her, "That's fine, I want the furniture back that I bought for you." And he took the furniture outside. Their apartment is on the first floor of their building, and he took the furniture outside and like broke the furniture pretty much, like didn't want it, but just was very, spiteful and mean. Because that, to me, that's just downright just mean.
Yeah.
But to his children, like to us, my dad was very, we would go places. I remember one time we went to Toys R Us, and it's me and my 2 brothers and him. And I just remember, being on his shoulders and like my feet never touching the ground. I remember, when we would spend a night at his house, we would all all three of us would sleep in the bed,
Mm-hmm.
and he would sleep on the floor, and like he would like play games with us while he was like laying on the floor. So to his children, he was very, very loving, very affectionate, very overprotective of us, very, just caring for the kids. I remember my sister's dad wasn't present. He bought my sister a bike. I remember, so to us, he was very, to the children, my brothers, they have two brothers, and he took care of, them, their brothers as well. So to the children, very loving. My dad would come and, tell me to pick a pocket, like pick a pocket, and whatever was in that pocket, I could like have the money that was in that pocket. So I used to always like try to pick like the biggest pocket, right? And he had bought me like this big piggy bank. It was like a dog, and the dog was like super big. And I would like put the money inside of the piggy bank. And he never carried change. He always carried fives and up. Like he never carried singles. He was very particular. And it's amazing because my brother is 13 months older than me. So when my dad died, he was 7. But my brother is so much like him, like so much like him. I remember us going somewhere, and my brother had on like a white shirt, and he had like spilled something on his white shirt. And he's like, "We have to go buy a shirt." And I was like, "What?" And he's like, "We have to go buy me another shirt." I'm like, what? Like, that's insane. That's insane, right? We're going somewhere. What are you talking about? But my dad was the same way, very, very like pristine and very, clean, extremely clean, extremely particular. So it's amazing just to see, although he wasn't there throughout our whole childhood, we all have these qualities from him. And so it's amazing.
Because I mean, you're married, right? I had an opportunity to quickly meet your husband, and you have a son. And I mean, it sounds like your relationship with your husband, I mean, no one ever knows, but it doesn't sound like it's that, like it's very stable. And
yeah. So I met my husband in 2017. And when we met, I was very intentional with meeting him. And what I mean by that, and vice versa, what I mean by that is a year and I think 3 days before we met, I had made this decision that I wanted to attract like the person for me. Like I was very intentional. I was very like, I don't want anything else but that person, right? Mm-hmm. And I didn't really know what I was looking for, but I thought it was like a feeling, maybe like when I met that person, I would know, right? Like it would be a feeling. I would just know, right? Like my inner guidance system would just let me know, like, this is your person. And so for the time before, because this is actually my second marriage. Mm-hmm. And so my first marriage lasted like 10 months, was a disaster, but it was a great thing. Right. And I'm super grateful that I got married that first time, because it brought up so much about me that I was like, oh no, I got to change this. And what it brought up was my first marriage, I had married someone and put myself in a situation that required me to be a caregiver and a therapist, even at home. Mm-hmm. And after doing therapy all day, by the time I got home, I was like, I don't want to do therapy. I don't want to therapize you. Right.
Yeah, that's fair.
Especially not as a wife. Like I want to be a wife, and I want to like not do this. Right. And it taught me something, that I didn't have boundaries. Right. And it was like, oh girl, you gotta get some boundaries, right? You gotta get some boundaries. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Boundaries you gotta get some boundaries. And that relationship taught me to not only have boundaries with him, but with my family. Like and that's where the guilt comes in, right? So because of that guilt that I had from childhood, I had taken on this role of protector. And I was the one that, went to college and got my doctorate and did all that. And so I felt like I'm responsible for everyone else. Even when it came to my mom, I felt like I got to take care of her. I got to take care of my sister. My sister had 2 kids, her first child when she was 17, about to be 18. And, I had gotten a scholarship to go to this boarding school for high school. And it was a full scholarship, would have been great for me. And I turned it down. And like my mom took me to Connecticut to see it and everything. And I turned it down. I turned it down because my sister had just had my niece. And I was like, she's going to need my help. And so, at 13, those were the decisions that I was making. And my mom was like, I want you to go to this school. And I was like, no, like my sister's going to need my help. And so she respected my decision. But I was making really big decisions at a young age, and that was just my role. That was the role that I played in my family. And so that kind of continued for a long time. And so when I met my first husband, it was in place, that thinking was in place. But I learned so much in that relationship because it was horrible. He was addicted to drugs. He was not violent towards me, but he was very verbally like abusive. And he required a lot. And I realized I don't want to do this. Yeah. I'm tired of taking care of people. Like, I don't want to do this. And so I drew those boundaries hard, right? My sister had that first niece, but then she also had a baby 2 years later. And so I co-parented them. Like, we raised those 2 girls. And after my first husband, right, I realized like, y'all are now grown and I can't do this with you anymore. I need to now take care of me. So I didn't really start taking care of me until about like 2015. And during that time that, I cleaned out, I bought a house, and I have 3 bedrooms. I intentionally did not make a guest bedroom. I turned one room into an office and I turned one room into a workout room.
Good for you.
And I said, if anyone comes to stay, they can't stay for long because it's going to be uncomfortable, because I didn't want guests. And I wanted my house to be about me, and I wanted it for me, right? And so I just became like really like selfish, but in a great way. And so I really started to get like super intentional about me and the things I did in my routine and what I didn't want to do, and saying no, right? And drawing those boundaries. So fast forward, I get to a place where I'm like, I think I'm ready for my person, right? And I do like this huge, like I wrote my list a year before, and I'm like reading the list and focused on the list, and I'm dating guys, and I'm like, this isn't it. He's cool and he's nice and he's cute. Even sometimes, the sex is good, but this isn't it, right?
Yeah.
And 3 days before I actually meet my husband, I do like this big purge. So I'm in the house, I'm like throwing like all types of stuff out. Like I throw out so much that half of my closet is clear. Like I clear out like half of my closet, and it's a walk-in closet. Like I have a good sized closet, and I like throw like all types of stuff out. And then like I start cleaning out my drawers, and a whole like drawer, 2 drawers were empty. Like that's how much stuff I got rid of. And I'm like throwing out appliances, and I'm just stuff, right? I'm like stuff that I don't, like is no longer me. Mm-hmm. And 3 days later, I go to this party, and it's my friend's party. And I go, and I'm tired because I actually just went to a bachelorette party. And then I was like, okay, now my other friend's having a party. I got to go to this party. So I go to that party, and I sit on the stairs because I'm tired. I'm like, and so he is sitting on the stairs, and my friend brings me some Jello shots, and Jello shots, they get stuck. So I'm using my finger to get them out.
I don't know what you're talking about.
I'm like, you know?
Yes, I do know.
And I feel someone looking at me and I like turn, like it's like Jello shot and I turn and he's like cracking up, right? Because I'm over here like digging the Jello shot out. So I start laughing and I'm like, don't judge me. Anyway, we start to talk and he's like, we're talking and he says, what do you do? And I tell him, I'm like, yeah, I was like a master Reiki practitioner and I'm a holistic therapist and this and that. And he says, I think my heart chakra is broken. And I say, your heart chakra is not broken. You just haven't met the right person yet for you to love and for them to love you. And I had the feeling.
I think I'm going to cry in a second. Go ahead.
The feeling popped up, right? And I had never felt the feeling. So I was like, what am I feeling right now, right? And we just start talking and it just goes like, it's flowing, right? And I probably got to this party around like 10. Before I know it, it's like 1:30 in the morning. Everyone has like left. He is now transitioned from being over here to like sitting like right below me on the steps. And we're like talking and we're just like talking. And we're like, okay, it's time to go. And he walks me to my car. He follows me to the highway. His phone is dead. And I was like, so he's like, call me when you get home. So I know that you made it home. So I call him when I get home. And by now it's like maybe 3 a.m, maybe. And I call him and we talk on the phone from like the sun came up. So it had to be like 6:30 in the morning. And from there, we've just been stuck like together. And he's very gentle, but also very mannish, but very gentle in being mannish.
No, my husband's the same way, so I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
And sets boundaries with me, but in a very loving way. I still, of course, have those trauma responses. And I remember in the beginning, the third day, he told me that, I was going to be his wife. And it freaked me out, right? Because I'm like, oh my gosh.
Too much, too fast, too much, too fast.
And so all the things, all the doubts, because I grew up in a household where my mom said, oh, they just want your, PUSSY. That was like her thing. Yep. Men just want your PUSSY. And so, this man is like, I know you're my wife. And then he whips out a list and he's like, and it's like handwritten and he's like reading the list, right? And I'm like crying because I'm like everything on the list. And he's like, I know we just met like 3 days ago, but I feel like you are the woman on this list, right? And the list is like, my wife will have, or my wife will, blah, blah, blah. So I had a list too. It reminded me that, I got one too, right? That I wrote like a year ago. And so I go home and I'm like reading the list and I'm like, oh my gosh, like this is like freaky, right? Freaky.
And I'm going to pause you right there for 1 second. Okay. I'm going to pause our recording for 1 second, friends. All right. And then we will be back in a moment. Thank you for listening to Mom Treading Water today with Dr. Fanike. Next week, part 2 will be available to hear the continuation of this interview. Dr. Fanike's information will be in the show notes, as well as all the information for Mom Treading Water. Please be sure to rate, review, subscribe, and share. Thank you for listening. Be kind to yourself. Be kind to others.